Thank you, Mr. S. for hosting the space. As always, spend lots of money down there.
Especially Keith, who just left.
While we're doing that, and while I continue with the announcements, please quietly feel your asses to see. You might have one of, I think, 4 cards underneath your chair. Because I think it's $25 gift card. I'm not sure. There's 5 of them, actually, so check around.
And check the empty seat next to you.
I want to thank John and David for doing video. Thank you to David Ortman, who couldn't be here tonight. He donated all of the chairs that you're now feeling around on right now. As you probably noticed, I was holding my iPad up. I'm actually broadcasting the meeting, so I didn't do that before. We're trying to do that for every meeting where the speakers are willing and able to do that. So thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, that's me. We
have beverages and snacks. This is my beginning speech, sorry. We have Facebook. Please turn off your cell phone. This is Patrick. Okay, so upcoming events. Saturday night, 15 Association Men's Party at the New Citadel. There's also going to be a Fifth City Party here at Mr. S in this space. Also Saturday night is the Ms. San Francisco Leather Contest at Hotel Whitcomb. Yep, go to mssfleather.org for tickets and information. This weekend is also Lillian Hunt's Immersive Animal Roleplay Training Camp. Check Race's Bar on Facebook. He's got a lot of good information there. I'm going to refer to that in a couple of places because I couldn't find good URLs otherwise. So thanks, Race, for that resource.
Yes.
November 2nd through 4th is going to be Leather Traditions, leathertraditions.org.
Yeah, that's a weekend with Master Jim and Slave Marsha. Maybe you've heard of them. They're like a really well-known master-slave pair. We've been together about 13, 14 years. He's a gay man, she's a lesbian, but they are master-slave. In fact, they were international master-slave. And they have really interesting, applicable to all, insights about the power exchange relationship, and especially the 24/7.
So there's a couple of slots left open for that. Check out leathertraditions.org for that. Also, November 2nd through 4th is the SCC Leather, Santa Clara Leather Weekend and Contest. So go to sccleather.org or see.
We have one of the contestants right here in the back. Yes.
Yes. November 9th through 11th, Cleo's going to be doing her Leather Sex Intensive weekend. There should be flyers out front on the thing. If not, she's posted a couple times in our Facebook group, and if not, you can find me and I'll hook you up with that. November 12th, Ed, are you here, Ed? I saw you earlier. Ed Ergid is doing daddy-boy relationships. Hi, Ed. Hi. He's doing a daddy-boy relationship discussion for the SF Ring. Master Morris is also here leading that discussion. So sfring.org for a little bit more info on that. November 13th, Leather Alley Organizing Committee is going to be looking for comments from the community on the next Leather Alley Pride, so you should go to that. I didn't write down what it was, but Race's Bar has got the information, so that's on Facebook. Grab me if you don't know how to get on Race's Bar on Facebook. Thank you, everybody who helped set up tonight. That would be Dustin, Justin, Race, Sam, Chris, Boy Chad, Adam, Daddy Robert, Derek, Sky, and Sean. Thank you guys so much. For those of you that get here a little bit later every time, this is a porn set when we start, and it's a porn set when we leave. So all of this stuff happens because of our volunteers, so thank you guys very much. You make this happen. And if you're interested in helping, come see me. We're looking for 4 to 6 folks like every month to make this happen. It's pretty easy in and out.
It is, but many's the organization that's folded because nobody would come and set up chairs.
Yeah. Sky Tanna, and Sky is our lead coordinator, so talk to him also.
There's also a sign-up sheet for not only our mailing list, but also to be on the volunteer mailing list outside all flyers. If you are interested, please sign up or see get your information, and we'll be dirty nice things to you.
LDG is free and open to the public, but it's not actually free to run. So if you would mind digging in your pockets to think about how much you might spend on a movie or an entertaining evening like you've had tonight. This will help us keep things running. It costs about $100 to $150 to get the snacks and supplies and duct tape to hang signs and just little things like that, plus whatever sponsorships you want to do. So if you
Just whatever you spend on erototoxins in one day.
I think that's it. So I will shut up now. Thank you guys very much for your attention. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, David.
Luck out, and our chairman are one. Next, we have two very exciting, to me, and I hope to you, LDG programs coming up. Next month, November 28th, which is the Wednesday after Thanksgiving, so your turkey will be all digested, your naps will be taken, your football games will be watched. We have Mark Frazier, one of LDG's favorite people in the world, coming to Beatbox, where we'll be meeting next month, for a demo and class on erotic wrestling.
Yeah.
Mark, huh?
Yeah, if Mark makes anybody pass out, it will not be a breastplate class. And in fact, if you are interested in demoing for that, talk to me before you leave. Oh, imagine that. Okay.
Was that for wrestling or breastplate?
Erototoxins are circulating madly. And then December 17th, a Monday, which is a different day for us, but in December everything's up for grabs. We are launching the book by two of our LDG faithful and really people who've been important in the history of LDG. Richard Sproat and David Portman are publishing their book, Sexual Outsiders, and you will see it here first in conjunction with our holiday party. So hope you all will be here for that. This book will actually exist by then, right? Yeah, okay.
I've seen it. It's good.
Okay, great. So, without further ado, if you sit here, Dave can see you real well.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm parapathetic.
No, you can move around a little bit. He follows pretty well. But I promised him I would mention it.
How's this going so far? Are you guys able to hear me? Is it interesting? You know, I mean,
You can tell when they don't all leave.
yeah. Well, I mean, next month is wrestling, and I wish I could be there.
Shit all back.
Shit all demo. I really appreciate you guys' attention. Yeah. So, I said I would show you a quote from Patrick Carnes about what he thinks about BDS. The moral judgment that is embedded in this, from many different levels, is stunning. But somebody is telling you that as a result of your behavior, there really is no trust or intimacy. You might think there is, but there's not. Wow. Let me just say that as I've traveled the country doing interviews and talking to people, I have never seen better communication skills and negotiation skills than exist in the kinky groups that I talk to. You know, couples and people say to me over and over and over again, if you can talk about this stuff, you can talk about anything. I've literally thought about doing a workshop that would travel the country where I take kinky people and I have them do workshops training vanilla people on how to have healthy relationships. Because, again, they're not seeing the reality. These statements are based on people other than you, or these statements are based on you if and when you get in trouble. But the problem is the result of the trouble, not the behavior. There we go. You know, now, again, it's a slippery slope, and it's coded in bedroom lubrication. That once you start in kinky behaviors, there's the idea that you will end up in moral depravity, raping animals and having sex with children. It's like and it's a slippery slope that it starts with sex addiction, and then they spread into BDSM addiction, pornography addiction. These folks are vicious. I didn't know this when I got into it. When I first started going out there talking about the book, I had therapist after therapist come up to me and say, "I'm so glad you wrote this book. I always wanted to do this, but I was scared to." And I said, "Scared? What are you talking about?" Now I know. These folks, the sex addiction community specifically, and I'm not even talking about the people who suffer from problems in their sexual behaviors, because I have tremendous compassion for them. I think that they need and deserve our help. I think that we need to offer them every opportunity for them to understand their sexual desires and offer them an environment within which to make healthy sexual decisions. But the sex addiction therapists have come after me. I've been equated with people who don't believe that the Holocaust happened or that global warming is real. They have, if you don't believe in sex addiction, you are a sex addict. And I am, and you can Google this. I mean, the stuff about me online is awful. Thank God they haven't got any naughty pictures of me yet. Yeah, the night is young, right? They tell me that my problems with sex addiction are because of the unconscious sexual desires that I'm struggling with. To which my reply is, I've got unconscious sexual desires on top of all the ones I'm conscious of? God! If I was as addicted to sex as they say, I would have spent all my time jerking off to porn and not writing a fucking book. The current group, and these folks are marketers extraordinaire. Now, one of the things that took me a good while to realize was that every time a sex scandal happens, the sex addiction community, therapist treatment community, they put out press releases about the dangers of sex addiction. Now, I caught on to it. So you remember Dominique Strauss-Kahn, okay? New York, French guy, allegedly raped a maid. Within 4 hours of the allegation that he had raped the maid, he was diagnosed as a sex addict by the media. They are marketing and selling something. And what are they selling? They're selling fear. They want you to be afraid of sex. Because it sells, because by making you afraid of sex, they can make sure that you tune in to the news to find out if maybe you are a sex addict or your husband or boyfriend or girlfriend or kid is a sex addict. And because then they can sell you the treatment. A guy named Eric Severeid, who was a newscaster in the 1960s, he said, you know, the chief cause of problems is solutions. These folks have a solution. And when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Every problem looks like an addiction to them. And BDSM addiction is now a concept that they're promoting. So is they are now, and the latest group that is horribly upset with me is folks who have started a program to certify the diagnosis and treatment of PTSD-like symptoms in the wives and spouses of sex addicts who are now traumatized by their partners' infidelities and sexual misbehaviors and lying and deception. Awful, devastating emotional deception and destruction to find out that your life partner has been lying. It's not trauma. But they are doing what I call ballet girl science. Remember, this started in the 80s, right? And what did we say in the 80s? Well, like, I'm going down to the movies. Well, yeah, she's like, a slut.
Oh my God!
Oh my God! Like, you were there too!
That's not a part of
So they say sex addiction is real because it is like alcohol addiction. It is like drug addiction. It is like eating disorders. But it's not. Ultimately, when we say something is like everything else, it's like nothing. And you end up with this, as I say, where if you add up all of the things that we can be allegedly addicted to, Twinkies, anybody remember the Twinkie defense?
Yep.
The first Take Back the Night march in the United States was here in San Francisco.
Oh, thank you for that information.
If you remember George W. Bush, we are addicted to oil. I think if you add all of these up, and Patrick Carnes is still out there selling this, he argues that there are over 131 million addicts in the country. This is half the population of this country. At that point, addiction is normal. I think what we're addicted to is using the word addiction. And there ain't no 12-step group we can go to break our addiction. And instead, find ways to hold people responsible for their behaviors and to prevent the labeling of bad choices as an illness.
David, what do you say to somebody who maintains that, yes, maybe food, sex, maybe even alcohol, that maybe these things are not in themselves addictive, but there is such a thing as an addictive personality that creates the addiction more than the substance or thing presumably addicted to?
I'm a little more willing to engage in that conversation because it takes us back to the real problem, which is the person making the choice. If we, now, sex addiction is like alcohol addiction, right? That's what we're told. 70% of the people who can be diagnosed as addicted to alcohol at any given time will get better on their own with no treatment. Why isn't sex addiction the same way? I think that having that kind of conversation can be healthy as we go back to the person who's making bad choices and try to understand why they're making bad choices, and that sex might just be one bad choice among many. At the end of the book, I talk about some of the things that go into this, and we talk about Twinkies. Let me talk about marshmallows. Oh, we already talked about marshmallows because of the s'mores, right? Okay. So let's talk about marshmallows some more though, because they're so much fun. A guy in the 1970s named Walter Mischel did research in the Northeast, and he had little kids come in, 3 or 4 years old, and he would put a little plate in front of them with a marshmallow on it, and he would say, if you can wait till I come back to eat that marshmallow, I'll give you 2 marshmallows. But if you eat the marshmallow while I'm gone, that's all you get. And then he would leave the room, and they would sit and watch the kid on video. And some kids would struggle and struggle and struggle and then eat it. And some kids were able to wait. It just so happened that his kids went to school with a bunch of those kids. And over the next 20 years, he happened to notice something. The kids who were able to wait, who were able to restrain impulses, had healthier lives. The kids who couldn't resist had problems with drugs and alcohol, domestic violence, they dropped out of school, they got in juvenile justice problems. The problem's not the sex or the drugs. And there's even some research right now that says that some brains may actually be wired for people to be disposed to a high reactivity to some of the neurochemicals involved in exciting kinds of behaviors. That may even be why some people are disposed to things like skydiving or BDSM, from that high level of sensation kind of seeking or play. That's not an illness, though, and it's not abnormal. It's normative. It's on the range of reactivity. But instead of saying these kids were addicted to marshmallows and they couldn't resist it, and instead of saying these kids were addicted to these behaviors, he said, well, what is going on? Some of us are better at restraining impulses and delaying gratification. And he brought those kids back. Actually, not those kids. He brought other folks in. And he said, okay, what does it take to help people make better decisions there, to restrain the impulse? And he started teaching skills of how to take some of these things that we really want and get them out of our minds. Put them away. He taught some kids a really neat technique of imagining that the marshmallow had a frame around it and was just a picture of a marshmallow. Even teaching people that helped them put some emotional distance between them and this thing and make better decisions. Now, these are not impaired people. These are not sick people. These are normal people. We all struggle with wanting to do bad things sometimes. I think that's part of being human. You should have seen me this morning, again, before I had my coffee. But I think when we have that kind of conversation, Patrick, it invites us to have healthier dialogue about what we as people need to do to be responsible for our behaviors and what we as a society need to do to invite people to be responsible for their behaviors.
But isn't there, aren't there, like, go ahead.
I had a question regarding addiction. I was somewhere along the line I heard that in the mental health community or the clinical community that behavioral addiction was sort of defined as that you could essentially be addicted to anything, and that the bar to measure that was that if you can't move forward with your daily activities of life, if it's impairing your ability to go to work, hold a job, have a decent social life or family life or whatnot, and that if whatever your behavior is impairing those things significantly, that's the bar, that's the benchmark for addiction. Is that accurate? And if it's not, is there a sort of general clinical definition of addiction?
So this is what we call the distress dysfunction criteria. If a behavior or a problem is causing distress in your life or dysfunction in your life, then that's one of the hallmark kind of requirements to meet levels of being a mental disorder. Now, the thing I showed you, I won't get back to, talked about a process addiction, and this is a non-clinical concept. It's a pop psychology concept where they are extending the addiction kind of idea to anything people get involved in that causes a problem in their life. Now, I know a lot more marriages that have broken up as a result of problems with professional sports and people who have to watch professional sports. Is that an addiction? Is it causing a problem in the relationship? Yeah, maybe. Does it make sense to call it an illness? The other thing about the distress dysfunction criteria is this a problem? Is the distress or dysfunction a result of this problem in me, or a problem of the relationship or the conflict between my behavior or my desire and the society? 30 years ago, 40 years ago, a lot of the folks in this room would have distress around their sexual desires and the conflict with society. That doesn't make it a disorder, though. It was then, by definition. One of the guys I talk about in the book is a guy who he's got a problem, and his problem is getting worse. When he first started, he could manage it, and now he can't. And he finally knew that he had a problem. His wife hates it, but he finally knew he had a problem when he was at his daughter's dance recital, and he found himself in the bathroom on the smartphone, and he couldn't stop. What's his problem? His problem is work. And he's a workaholic. And is that a disease? Well, actually, in Japan, there's research that shows a lot more people die every year as a result of workaholism and the damage to the heart and stress than you would think. But America is not going to call that a disease, because if we did, can you imagine the workman's comp claims? So, just because something has distress or causes dysfunction in somebody's life doesn't mean, doesn't mean it's necessarily a disorder. Here's the other thing, is that, remember what I just said. These folks have, and I'm not even shitting you, these folks have said, I am a sex addict, period. They have diagnosed me as a sex addict, even though there's clearly no distress or dysfunction. So they apply this label if it causes distress in your life or theirs. If your behavior causes them distress, you've got the problem.
But how do they, I mean, isn't there a fairly rigorous standard for something being habit forming? I mean, if you take the laxative and pull out your trifocals and read the little package insert, it says this many people had a problem in trials and this many people found it habit forming and it took this long. I mean, there are standards for what's addictive, right? For what is habit forming and
sort of, kinda. The standards are very loose. Again, so we used to think, we used to say that the hallmarks of addiction were physiological dependence, which manifested in withdrawal. Again, alcohol and sex addiction, they're alike, right? But if I take away sex from somebody who's had sex every day of their life, what's going to happen? Not much. If I take away alcohol from somebody who's been drinking daily, heavily, for many years, what will happen? They might die, because their body has become physiologically dependent. But marijuana doesn't appear to have a physiological dependence. It does appear to have a psychological dependence, where people are using marijuana to serve significant functions in their life, and they struggle without it. Now, should we then be able to apply the same concept to sex? The sex is normal, and use of sex is normal. You really can't go through life without having sex or having a sexual desire. There are folks who are argued to be asexual, but even they have some levels of sexual desire. They're on the low end of the spectrum. Use of marijuana is not necessarily normal or normative in life. So applying that methodology to a normal human behavior is where things then get real challenging. And we can talk about somebody using sex in unhealthy ways in their life just the same way we can talk about people doing anything else unhealthy in their life. We don't have to call it an addiction. We don't have to call it a disease to offer people help.
I have a question. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. All right, I'm going to say this. I am in a 12-step program for sex addiction. I understand some of the things that you said, like, out of 6 questions, out of 51 questions, if you answer 6, then you're a sex addict. I would think that's utter nonsense. I'll just say for me that the addiction got so bad that I tried to kill myself. I literally tried to kill myself. And I needed a place so I could figure out, why am I doing what am I doing? Why are these sexual behaviors not making me feel good? Why am I feeling miserable all the time? I went to a 12-step program to start learning about that. And like you said, I started realizing there was a deeper issue. And I went inside, and now I'm in a 12-step program. That's just me to deal with that deeper issue. And what I have found for me, is that I don't get into those behaviors that cause me to go and take, to go on that road again. So what I'm trying to say is that I think there's some good in a 12-step program to help a person. Now, one of the things I understood about a 12-step program especially with sex addiction, is that the person has to decide for themselves. Not Patrick Carnes, not the AD, whatever they are, it's that person who has to decide. And there are so many solutions to it. If some people want to take a moral place, then they can do it. I've noticed in the programs that I've gone to that there's some people, their part of their sexual behavior doesn't affect me. Okay? And I'm like, okay, that's cool. That is the way you deal with it. I have a way of dealing with me. And I made a commitment for myself to develop a healthy sexuality. I didn't make it for me to be sober, I have to become a unit. Some people decide to do that, but that's not me. And I've had to learn to respect that. So what I'm trying to say is that I can see some of the aspects of what you're saying, and I can see where some of it's very dangerous and labeling gay men, but there are, I know, and because I've seen it, there are gay men who are literally suffering because they're doing sexual behaviors that are not only affecting themselves but the people around them that they love.
You know, I'm really glad you said that. Again, if I have come across in any way on two things. Number one, if I've come across suggesting that I don't think 12-step groups are helpful, I really want to be clear. I believe that they offer a tremendous amount of social support for people who are struggling. They offer a community of support to make better decisions. I really am glad that they're out there, especially because they're free. Because a lot of people can't afford the level of treatment to come to somebody like me or to get support in other ways. But 12-step groups are not medicine.
Right, I agree.
And the Supreme Court has even held that 12-step groups are spiritually based organizations.
Right.
I'm not judging that. I'm simply making a statement. Again, it's not medicine or science. Secondly, and please understand, I am incredibly compassionate and supportive of people who are struggling to make good decisions. And I think that they absolutely deserve all the help that they can get. And I'm really glad you're still alive.
Thank you. So am I.
One of the things I do besides this is I'm a master suicide prevention trainer. And I go around and I train people on how to prevent and assess and identify risk of suicide. And some of the number one risk factors are feeling isolated and feeling like your behaviors are somehow immoral and rejected by others. That's some of the danger to this stuff. The 12-step groups that you found, and I like that you've been able to pick and choose. There are 12-step groups, and there are very specific sex addiction groups that specifically say, for instance, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, I believe it is, or SLA, says sex as a part of their charter. If you're not monogamous and if you're having sex, including masturbation, with anybody other than your monogamous partner, that's unhealthy and you have to refrain from that.
That's Sexaholics Anonymous.
Thank you.
Not SLAA.
I appreciate that. Thank you for saying. I can't keep them straight. There's a lot of them. There is, and I'm not making fun, okay?
No.
Okay, there is a 12-step group for people who are addicted to messiness, for people who are messyholics. Do they gain support for their struggle of keeping their house neat and clean? Because they don't have a slave to do it for them. Probably. I'm not saying anything. My house is messy. Mine's not. And again, I am all for offering people every opportunity to help them make good decisions and to make healthy decisions. But I think that we have to be very, very careful of when this starts stepping into medicine because of how quickly it steps into law.
We have less than 10 minutes.
Okay, we only have 10 minutes, but I'm not going anywhere if people want to come and ask me. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm Luke. Hi.
Hi.
And it's not just your butt, it's hot.
And it's really hot in here, I'm telling you. Let me turn this off.
So,
Thank you.
In the run-up to this presentation that you're doing, there was a lot of controversy, and there were a couple of people who were asking whether there would be clinicians who actually deal with addiction who would be here to challenge you. And I knew it wasn't going to be David and it wasn't going to be Richard. So I think the person was hoping it would be me, and it's not. But I did want to parse out some of the stuff that you talked about that I wasn't clear on.
Sure.
One of the things was about 12-step facilitation in residential treatment settings, because there is absolutely zero evidence that 12-step facilitation in residential treatment settings helps with any kind of process disorder.
That's right. And there's actually a book coming out called Inside Rehab that really breaks this out. I recommend it. Won't be out for a few months now.
But there's a ton of evidence that says 12-step facilitation, even in residential settings, helps with chemical dependency. And so those are different things. The other thing.
Oh, well, actually, if I can parse that just a little bit, I'm sorry. There is lots of evidence about the effectiveness of 12-step support groups in reducing chemical dependency in outpatient settings, not residential settings. The application of the 12-step movement in residential settings, even at Hazelden, where the 12-step groups really began, their outcomes studies exclude all the people who drop out and don't respond to surveys. And so the outcome research out of those groups is really questionable.
Okay, so just looking at the SAMHSA site today, so they're disagreeing. Their TSF says inpatient and outpatient. And TSF is like, jargon for 12-step facilitation. It's when the therapist works with a client, and in addition to whatever other tools they're using, like cognitive behavioral therapy, they also facilitate 12-step stuff. So that's just one piece. I wanted to separate out the process stuff from an actual chemical dependency. Here's the other thing of the research, which is there's tons of research that says chemical dependency is a real disorder and it has physiological consequences, whether there's tolerance or whether it's marijuana. There's this trip switch of this little roller coaster in the brain called the mesocortical limbic pathway, and when that gets tripped, you've got a chemical problem. There's Zippo when it comes to process disorders, except for an overactive amygdala, which is that little tyrant that sits on our Crohn's and says, I want what I want, when I want it, how I want it, and reason began until I get it. A lot of us are that way all day, every day. So there's sort of a separate thing going on, and one of the problems that I see, and I fit those categories that you had. I'm clergy, as well as being a therapist, and I'm a slut. So I don't quite fit the clergy characteristic, and polyamorous. So I'm going to lose if I have to go on Dr. Phil. But one of the difficulties that I see and that I saw, I'm now working for Community Health, which shall remain nameless because I can't represent them. But prior to that, I was working for one of the top rehabs in the country. And Patrick Carnes was a consultant. And I wanted to kill him most days. And one of the problems with it, and one of the difficulties that I have with the 12-step fellowships that are attempting to apply the disease model to something that has not empirically been proven as a disease, unlike chemical dependency, is that, and the reason that Sexaholics Anonymous did not say it as a single fellowship is because precisely of the problems that you mentioned. That's why there's 6 more fellowships that have to deal with it, and they're applying a different treatment model than Sexaholics Anonymous. But they're still using a disease model to deal with something that we have no evidence of as being a disease. And that's one of the big problems. When I worked at this fancy schmancy rehab in Marin, we had many clients who would come in, and some of the other clinicians and the clinical director would immediately peg them as sex addicts. And I'd fight with them tooth and nail, and one case in particular where they did this to somebody. It was a gay man, a lawyer, high income, white, and his problem was meth-driven sex. And I said, his problem is meth-driven sex. Let's figure out a way to decouple his sex from his meth. They didn't want to do that. So they put him through Patrick Carnes, which to me is very little difference than what was done in Nazi Germany with paragraph 175A. Because the reason that paragraph 175A got passed was because a bunch of doctors said, those perverts are crazy, let's put them away from the rest of society. So that's what Patrick Carnes is doing. I don't see much difference in it at all. And, so they put this guy through this bullshit. And I was calling it bullshit the whole time. I don't know why they didn't fire me. And so the guy gets out, and he relapses, of course, because the speed is what gives him the permission to get the kind of sex that he wants to get. So he relapses over that, he comes back, and I say, see, I told you so. Let's deal with decoupling his speed from his sex. And my clinical director said, I don't care, it's another $36,000 for us.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on. And I can tell you from the inside, that's what's going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I believe in follow the money. There's one organization that makes $12 million a year selling pamphlets and books in their nonprofit religious-based organization, making all of this money about beating pornography addiction. There's a lot of money behind this.
I want to respect both people who want to talk to David and people who have time that they have to leave. And it is it's very close to 9:30. So if you have to go ahead and go.
I will keep that. Thank you. You guys have been a great audience.
No. Let's take a couple more questions. Keith's gone. He won't care if we're here another 10 minutes. So let's give ourselves 10 minutes, okay? Spike.
I have a short question. Where do you see this debate going from here? It seems like the debate over sex and sexuality and morality progresses as America progresses, perhaps as America's religious beliefs progress. 1/5 of Americans now say they're not religiously affiliated, according to Pew Research. So is this just a matter of a debate over sex and sexuality evolving over time as America evolves over time, or is this something that you see that could actually slide backwards historically if people don't actively debate this issue?
I think the latter. Note, the way in which society shifted from the 70s to the 80s, and sex addiction was born then. Are we heading towards a more permissive, open kind of attitudes towards sex? I really think we are, and yet I think that there is a very strong reaction right now against that. And I'm saddened by the polarization of the debate in our society. I'm sad that I can't question the legitimacy of this without being painted in the cloth of being just an awful person who is rejecting everything. I think that as long as Fox News can make money off this debate, they will. And it's going to drive us more and more aggressively towards scary stuff. Now, I'm hopeful that the research on hypersexual disorder that is going on is going to unpack some of this. But I don't think so. And here's why. Because there is so much money to be made off of this, they are just going to rebadge sex addiction as hypersexual disorder and move on. And it's really already happening. So as a result, I think that if it is accepted into the DSM in the appendix, I think it will continue. I think folks will take that as a sign of legitimacy, and this debate's going to continue. Part of my goal is to put that voice out there. Before me, Marty Klein, a therapist here in town, was one of the only folks that was publicly challenging sex addiction as a concept. I think there need to be more of us saying, wait a minute, sex is not a disease.
So I have a question for you then. I did a search on erototoxins on women, right? I brought that up. And what I noticed is that it was just line after line about basically people saying it's bullshit, right?
Yeah.
So my feeling is I know that you're saying that there's this pressure, there's this movement to try to legitimize sex addiction as a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, with the advent of the internet and with the ability to gain real information almost instantaneously, do you think that has some impact on people's realistic ideas on what these things are? It seems to me like a lot of this stuff is coming out of people who are frankly from another generation. They're just not getting it anymore.
I would say yes if the media had not accepted sex addiction whole cloth, and they have. I showed you Larry Craig. Some of the leading sex addiction therapists went on Larry King, when Larry Craig came, all that stuff, and diagnosed him as a sex addict, right there on national TV. The media has grabbed onto this concept because it sells fear.
And it's an easy out for those
And it's
people.
an easy out. And unfortunately, if you, I can't show you, okay, but so if you go to the website for my book, Myth of Sex Addiction, on Amazon, and you scroll down, you know how they have the ads? The ads are for sex addiction treatment facilities, including one that says, "Are you tired of living with sin and fear of shame? Come to our treatment facility." On the page for my fucking book. So, I would like that to be the truth, but there's not enough contrary evidence out there.
Worst case scenario, DSM includes sexual addiction and people can be diagnosed as a sex addict. I'm a caffeine addict. What could potentially happen? I mean, why is it such a terrible thing for, the one guy who claims sex addiction as a way to get out of the death penalty, yeah, they can make him go to treatment for it. How could they compel anyone to go to treatment for sex addiction absent some sort of cause like having been involved in a sexual crime?
So there's also a movement to include rape fetish in the DSM, so that they can lock up people who are fetishized rape. There is an island in Puget Sound where they have people locked up for the crime of being pedophiles. Well, wait a minute. Pedophilia is a disorder, not a crime. These are people who have committed crimes, served their time, been judged dangerous to society as a result of this mental illness, and are now committed to this island, and I'm not even making that up, for the rest of their lives. Nobody has ever been released from this island. It's really fucking creepy. Is that an extreme? Yeah, sure. I'm going to own that that's an extreme. But as a medical professional and as a scientist, I am really reluctant to put that kind of power in the hands of administrations and governments that I'm not sure I can trust or exert control over. Possibly, yeah. The other thing I think that is really more likely to be dangerous is you will be inundated by people arguing that your sexual behavior is unhealthy and disordered because they don't like it. Even during the break. What?
I grew up Baptist.
Yeah, yeah. And now they get to tell you it's not just immoral, but it's disease. Even during break, I had people telling, I talked to some folks about therapists out there that are touting sex addiction and telling people they're sex addicts. I told the story of a woman who walked up to me and she was in tears. I had just done a presentation like this. And she said that her son had been in one of these alcohol treatment facilities. And he called her up and said, "Mom, was I ever sexually abused?" And she said, "Well, no." And what are you talking about? He said, "Well, they're telling me not only am I an alcoholic, but I'm a sex addict too. And that I'm a sex addict because I must have been sexually abused." That's one of the other things that they say. With no scientific base, they say, well, sex addiction comes from sexual abuse. Lots of people have been sexually abused and not engaging in these kinds of problems. But the sad part of the story is he died just shortly thereafter from the results of alcoholism. The woman spent the last 10 years in agonies of guilt because she believed that her son was sexually abused, that was part of why his life was so tragic, that partially it's her fault because she, as any mom, felt guilt of not preventing that. She came up to me in tears saying, well, she never knew these people were selling snake oil, that they were applying the sex addiction label across the border legitimately. If this becomes a real disorder and insurance companies are paying for it and the diagnosis is more acceptable, that level of mistreatment is going to be everywhere.
Affects your jobs.
Yeah.
We've got 2 minutes.
Okay.
You pick.
Well, I just want to say, and I'm willing to stay after, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. Thanks to Patrick and to Richard Eric, for you guys bringing me out. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with good folks like you. Feel free to stay in touch. Feel free to drop me an email, drdavidlay.com. I did not change my name before I started writing about sex. It was just destiny that Lay, Dr. Lay, writing about sex. Although it is spelled L-E-Y as opposed to L-A-Y. So, thank you.